Um, yes, well, that's my job. And a lot of people think that I'm crazy. For me, being crazy is not living your dream. Is living without dreams. Is not being passionate and not doing what you love. For me, they are the crazy people. And my dream when I was a kid was to fly. And I remember telling this to one of my school teacher. I think I was 7 or 8, and I told her I want to fly, and she said, "People can't fly." She was right in a way, but it was a way of telling me you have to stop dreaming and go back in normality, go back in the line. And I kept on dreaming, and after university, I moved to the US to become a pilot, a helicopter pilot. That was my dream of flying, which was back then very acceptable for my parents as well. And I started flying helicopters for about 2 years. I got my private license, I got my commercial license. And one day I was flying with a friend who was my co-pilot. We were flying on a new machine. And one day we had to land because of a little issue with oil pressure. And we had to land, and we landed on a very small airfield in the middle of nowhere in the desert. It was in California. And we landed, and on the other side of the airfield, people were skydiving, jumping parachutes. That was 25 years ago. And this day changed my life because my friend said, "Let's go skydiving." I said, "Really? Do we have to do this?" It wasn't really planned, but I think I'm very curious. I like to try new things. I like to stay open with my mind. And that's where I did my first parachute jump. And to make a long story short, I quit flying helicopters as a commercial pilot. A lot of rules as a pilot, a lot of paperwork, a lot of procedure. I've always liked freedom. I've always been obsessed by freedom. And for me, flying my body and not in a machine, less rules, more freedom, more speed, but also more danger. And I think unconsciously, I was attracted to danger and at the same time, reward and excitement. It's all connected. And then I moved back to Belgium. That's where I'm from. I moved back to Brussels. I was born in Brussels, and I thought, okay, what's the next step? I think usually when I start something, it's a lot of commitment. And that's where I started base jumping. And this is what you've seen in the video. It's way more exciting, but way more dangerous. So I was really attracted. And I think I jumped from every possible building in Belgium, in Brussels. And that's how it started. And then 1 year later, I saw a picture of a French guy with a wingsuit. And the wingsuit is what you see on your screen. It's the picture with the blue suit. It's literally a suit with wings. And it was for me the closest thing to fly as a human being. And I have a lot of friends who are pilots. And when they see this, they always have the same reaction. This is it. We can really fly. For those who are asking themselves, do you still need a parachute? Yes, otherwise I wouldn't be here to tell my story. You need a parachute. You can see it on my back. I always have a parachute which I'm opening to land safely on the ground. And then that's how it started. I never really planned to make it a job. It was not my idea, but then I met the right person on the right time. When I came back from Brazil, usually I never tell this, but this is, I think, interesting, very short anecdote. But I moved to Brazil, Sao Paulo, for about 10 months. I had a cameraman who is a still Brazilian guy. He lived in Sao Paulo. Cameraman is someone who is filming you. And we were training for the extreme games. And we met in Florida. And then he said, "What do you do for the next month?" I said, "I have nothing planned." He said, "You coming with me to Sao Paulo and we're gonna train." And I was training in Campinas, Azul do Vento. It's a little anecdote for those who know. If you want to jump, I don't know. There's Botuva near São Paulo as well, where you can skydive. It's a very popular place. I have a lot of friends there. I never say this, but I think I had the best year of my life in Brazil. I'm ready to come back. Okay, let's go back to flying. And then when I came back from Brazil, I met the right people at the right time, someone from Redbull. And they asked me, do you want to be part of the team? I didn't think too long. I said, yes, of course, because I realized that I could, out of my passion, I could make it a kind of a job. And basically what I've been doing for 20 years now, I'm creating content. And I think it's interesting if you are in marketing or whatever you do in sales, basically they don't sell a product, they sell an emotion, they sell an experience by creating content. And basically every year, except last year, but I have to convince them that my idea is worth investing in, and that we're going to create content, a story, a project, an expedition. So I'm really selling them my idea. And I've been doing this with Red Bull and with other sponsors, with TV programs, documentaries, and so on. So I'm really creating content. And this is, yes, this is not my last project, but this is in terms of patience and teamwork. It was my nicest project. As you can see, it's in Egypt. And I was in Cairo in Egypt in 2010 for another project, which never happened. And we had a dinner with my team. And I always work with the team. It's an individual sport. But if I didn't have a team, I wouldn't be here telling my story and sharing these stories with you. So I always work with a team. We had a last dinner in Egypt. And I told my team, we're going to come back and I'm going to fly above the pyramids with my wingsuit. And everybody started laughing. Everybody said it's Middle East, it's military airspace, it's a very protected area. Forget it. It's never going to happen. For me, that's where it starts. How bad do you really want something? And after a lot of meetings and working with the right people on site, we finally, after 7 years, we finally got the authorization to fly above the pyramids. And for me, what I took from this project was, of course, the jump was magical and the performance. But what the best part was working with very different people. It's Middle East, it's a different culture, it's a different way of working. I was working with women, with men, with younger people, older people, military people. And we all had a different way of thinking. It was very diverse. And so I really had to adapt. And of course they had to adapt, but we had the same goal and we were all walking in the same direction. And finally we could do this and we pulled it off. And a little inside story, funny story, but we had very strict rules with the militaries. And one of the rule, it was on a contract. We had a lot of paperwork. You know, I don't like paperwork. One of the rule was not to land next to one of the monuments, next to one of the pyramids. And they showed me a plan and they organized a landing zone. We call this a landing zone where basically I have to land with my parachute way further than the pyramids. I knew it was impossible to land there. I knew it from where I looked at the plan. It was impossible. I didn't say anything, because I really wanted this picture. And finally, we had a lot of headwind as well, so it didn't help. But finally, we landed on the right bottom corner of the pyramid. They didn't like it. And I will never forget, but the moment we landed, we had 50 soldiers running at us with heavy machine guns and asking us very aggressively, where do you come from? And I said, from there. And I had a really good team on site, team from Red Bull and an agency. And finally, they released us and we went back home. But it was a very interesting project. This is Nazca Line. It's in South America, Peru. You know that. Same story, took me 5 years to have the authorization. I had a project in Brazil which never happened as well. I'm not gonna tell what, because I might come back to make it happen. I had a few expeditions in the Amazon jungle, especially in Peru as well. And last year I had a project in India. Believe me, India, I thought Egypt was complicated. India is just another level. But what a very, very interesting and enriching experience to work with, to be able to work with these people. And basically it was flying above, there's a big monument in India, Taj Mahal. It's not going to happen this year either, I think, with what's happening. I hope it's going to happen in 22, 23. So I still have a lot of dreams. I'm still training hard. I still have a lot of ideas, and I plan to continue for a long time, as long as I can fly. But I'm not here to talk about myself and what I've been doing and what I'm gonna do. Originally, I studied psychology, and I specialized myself in high performance psychology. I've always been obsessed. I've always been fascinated by high performance. Why are some people, some organizations, some teams performing at a higher level than others? Why are some people bolder than others and taking and willing to take more risks and basically having better results? This is something I'm going to talk a lot, but I think risk is deeply connected with success. If you don't take any risks, you will never get any reward. So for me, it has always been, and what we study, it's not rocket science. It's basically how do you deal with certain emotions? How do you deal with, for example, fear? How do you deal with your brain? And this is what we study. What we study is, and why are some people willing to go the next level and pushing the envelope of what's possible? And you could ask me the question, okay, but you jump from buildings, we work in the buildings. What is the connection here? Well, what you will see in my presentation here is that regardless of the environment we work in, I work with elite football players. I work with elite athletes from any kind of sports. I work with people like you, managers, leaders, CEOs, salespeople, chefs, artists, any type of people. And what I've seen the last 15, 20 years is that if you want to become the best version of yourself, if you want to be fulfilled, if you want to take more risks and basically go closer to your dreams and your goals, we all use the same tools. We all use the same techniques. We all use the same skills, regardless of the environment. So the first question is, okay, performance. You talk a lot about performance, but what is performance? And usually when I have people in front of me, and this is something we can discuss later, I ask the question, what is performance? And I have 10, 15 different answers. Why? Because we all have our own benchmark of excellence. We all have different life goals. We all have different timing in life. We all have different ambitions. In the end, we're all climbing a ladder. And for me, it's not how high you climb, is your ladder at the right side of the wall? So for me, performance and performing for the sake of performing doesn't make any sense. I've met people who are very high on the ladder, but they're very unhappy, unfulfilled. And I've met people who are a little bit lower, but they are completely aligned with who they are as human beings. They are connected with themselves, and basically they're very happy and very fulfilled. So for me, someone who is performing, and I'm going to talk here about sustainable performance, is someone basically who is fulfilled, who is satisfied, who is a happy person, and not the other way around. So that's the first thing. And the second question, what I usually get is, okay, but how do you influence performance? How do you get better? How do you perform at a higher level? How do you go from good to great? You've heard this before. How do you go from good to great? There are many factors. In elite sport, you can see their genetics. There are athletes who are genetically better than others. This is something you can change. Then you have your social environment. You have the culture. You have your education. Of course, commitment, hard work. You know that. I'm not going to talk about this today. What I want to talk about today is basically, where is the last mile? Where is that little difference? And basically, what can you control? Because you can change your education. This is something you had, and this is something you have. You can change your culture. You don't change genetics. What you can change is how you deal with what's inside here. And what we see, people who are good and people who are really great and excelling at what they do, they make the difference in their brain. It's what we call, and that's what we study in high performance psychology. And that's what we call mental strength, is basically how do you deal with your thoughts? How do you feed your brain with positive insights? How do you basically change from how do you shift from a negative thinking pattern to a positive thinking pattern? That's mental strength. And then also you have your emotional intelligence, your emotional well-being. And for me, and it's not for me, this is basically scientifically proven, and this is something we study all the time, but this is deeply connected with how you perform. It's so what we see is your emotions are not the problem. It's how you deal with your emotions. And I think the last 12, I would say even 15 months, worldwide, we're still going through a roller coaster of emotions. All of us, even me. I mean, I can be maybe, mentally strong and I can deal with my emotions, but every day you go from high to low. You are faced with uncertainty. You have to be resilient. You've heard it. You have to deal with emotions all the time, because usually what stands between you and your dreams and your goals, it's how you deal with emotions. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And emotional intelligence, it's on two levels. It's with yourself, like I said, how you deal with your emotions, your self-awareness, your self-consciousness, but also it's with other people. It's how you deal with other people's emotions. It's how your empathy, your compassion, it's your ability to show your vulnerability. I think in a post-COVID world, as a leader, you need empathy, you need authenticity, you need a clear communication, and that's all part of your emotional intelligence. When I was talking about emotional intelligence 10, 15 years ago in big organizations, people were laughing at me. Hey, no, there is no room for emotional intelligence. We don't need this. We have numbers, we have goals, no, I think more than ever, you need emotional intelligence. Though that's where you make the difference. The big problem. So the good news, I have good news and bad news here. The good news, this is something you can train. And I'm going to repeat this. This is something you can work on. Your brain is not a muscle, but you have to consider it and you have to work with your brain as a muscle. We call this neuroplasticity. It's not because you read an article or a book on resilience or emotional intelligence that after reading the book, you're going to be resilient or emotionally intelligent. You have to train. If you want to run a marathon, if you want to perform at something, you have to dedicate some time. The big difference, it's very abstract. We don't know this. This is pretty new in psychology. That's the good news. And I'm convinced everyone can work on his or her emotional intelligence. The bad news is that when we are under pressure, like we've been the last 14 months, 15 months, when we are faced with uncertainty, when we are faced with transformation, changes, things we're not used with, our brain is automatically going to tell us what can go wrong. That's basically, it's a fight or flight response. It's what we call fear. There are many, many different types of fear, but this is what we call fear. Our brain is telling us this is going to go wrong. You want to go there, your brain is going to tell you don't go there because this could go wrong. Your brain is never going to tell you this could be a new opportunity. This could be for the better. This could be a positive change. I can use this. And it takes a lot of effort to go the other direction. And it's very easy especially if you're influenced by negativity, it's very easy to go to the easy direction, which I call basically negative direction. And you know, in psychology, we always tell people negative emotions, they stick like Velcro in your brain. Positive emotion, they glide like Teflon. People who are emotionally intelligent, people who are mentally strong, people who are resilient, it's the opposite. Positive emotion, they stick like Velcro, and negative emotion, they glide like Teflon. It's basically your ability to let go. And there's a very good example here. I have a glass of water, and usually I ask people, what's the weight of the glass? And people are guessing this is 50 gram, 30 gram, doesn't matter. It's very light. I can hold it like this. If I hold it for 15 minutes, it's going to become a little bit heavier. If I hold it for 2 hours, I'm going to have a cramp. If I hold it the whole day, it's not possible. And it's the same with negative emotions. If you keep negative emotions like anger, sorrow, frustration in your brain, after a certain time, it's going to become very, very heavy. A very good example. I have many examples, but this is an example I'm using all the time. I work a lot with football players, and when I ask a football player, I work with the Belgian national team, the Red Devils, and other players as well. But usually when I ask them, when something goes wrong, are you able to let go and start on a blank page? And a lot of them are telling me, no, I keep frustrated. And basically, I'm starting to play bad. It's going to the other players, and the whole energy of the team is decreasing. There are very few football players, and I'm going to take one example. It's Messi. He's very good. He's talented. He's got the full package, but he's emotionally extremely good. When something goes wrong, he lets go. We call this immediate feedback, and he starts on a blank page in 1 second. This is something you can really work on. And this is what we call resilience. It's called, we call it cognitive reframing. It's not what happened, it's how you frame it, and basically how fast can you let go. So that's really how you deal with your emotions. So the next question is, of course, okay, that's great. Okay, emotional intelligence, mental strength, fantastic. But where do you start? How do you do that? Give us a trick, give us a secret. Or the bad news, there's no trick. Like I said, this is something you work on. This is something you can train. And the more you become aware, and that's where it starts, self-awareness, self-leadership. The more self-awareness you have, the easier it becomes to deal with your emotions, because you're very aware of what's going on in your brain. Self-awareness. So when I ask people, do you have self-awareness? Usually I have everyone is, yeah, it's bullshit. We have very little and usually way less self-awareness than we think. Why? And you've heard this before, but we all use shortcuts all the time. We're stuck in beliefs. We're stuck in certain habits because we've been doing this for years. We're stuck, we're prisoners of a certain thinking pattern. And we have a lot of expectations. When we do something, when we hire someone, when we always have we have opinions, we have expectations, and it's very hard to let go of this. And basically to start on a blank page without these expectations, without this judgmental behavior. And our brain is making shortcuts all the time. It's very practical. When you drive, you don't have to rethink the whole process. When you take a coffee at the coffee machine, you don't have to rethink the whole process. So it's very practical for, I would say, 95% of our actions. But it's very bad for the rest, because when you are under stress, your brain is basically going to use the same thinking pattern all the time, the same judgmental behavior, and that's what we call cognitive biases. It's basically, it can be very negative. When you're with other people, you have to hire the way you react to a certain people, to certain actions, and so on. So it's very hard to break the routine, to break the thinking pattern, to take a little bit of distance, and basically to reassess the whole situation. So sometimes it can be very interesting to stop what you do, to break the routine, to get outside of your habits and create more self-awareness. When I ask people in your environment, can you basically stop what you do and do nothing for 15 minutes? It's very hard. We're always busy. We have to do it. We're kind of in an obligation, in a duty mode all the time, because this is also part of our education. It's very normal. So sometimes it's interesting to break this and basically reset your brains, reset your beliefs, reset your habits. Who you are today is basically based on your habits, your core beliefs, and your routines, which is almost the same as habits. And we have very good beliefs, we have very good habits, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But we all also have habits and certain beliefs that prevent us from reaching basically the best version of ourselves, or dreams, or like using our full potential. So there are many skills that you can use, and that this is something I use them in my high risk environment. And basically I selected 3 what I call power skills, and I'm gonna show you. You've heard about soft skills, you've heard about hard skills. Soft skills we don't like, it's soft, okay? Hard skills, you have them, otherwise you wouldn't be there. So this is not something we're gonna discuss. Today I'm gonna talk about power skills. Why? Because this is something you can really work on. This is something you can really create, and basically that's going to give you the edge to have more self-awareness, to confront your fears, to deal better with stress and uncertainty. And today I'm going to talk about 3 power skills. And for me, these are the most important. Basically, these power skills enabled me to survive and still survive in a very, very high risk and dangerous environment. And it's your mindset. Everything starts with your mindset, your focus, and trust. And trust is more in a team environment. And before going going deeper on these 3 power skills, I'm gonna debunk a myth. And it's a question I have all the time. You feel fear. So a lot of people think because of what I do and the risk I'm taking, I don't feel any fear. So they think I have some kind of brain issue, or that I'm a mutant, or that I'm a kind of a very special person with supernatural powers. No, I'm and I consider myself to be a very, very normal human being. I feel fear like you, like everyone else. And I'm going to go a little bit further. Fear is very important. I hope you feel fear. Fear is a very interesting emotion, because without fear, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have survived millions of years, and we would be extinct. So fear has enabled human beings to survive. It's fight or flight response. The problem is we're not using fear the correct way. And fear for me, and every emotion is the same. We have a tendency to categorize emotions. Oh, this is a negative emotion because it doesn't feel well. And this is a positive emotion because I feel good. In performance psychology, there is no negative or positive emotion. It's only an emotion. And every emotion has a function. If you feel a frustration, it's your brain telling you, I'm not okay with the situation. I need to change something. Fear is exactly the same. And fear in my environment is a question of survival. I have to feel fear. People ask me, when are you going to stop? I always tell people, I'm going to stop when I stop feeling fear, because fear has a very clear function. It makes me aware of the danger. It's telling me very clearly, you're taking a lot of risk with very high consequences. Be prepared, be well trained, feed your brain with positive emotions, trust yourself, and so on, and so on, and so on. So fear, the big problem is most of us, when we feel fear, our brain is telling us, stop, don't go there. When I feel fear, I want to go there. And basically, when you see people, entrepreneurs, people like me, jet fighter pilots, basically people who are taking risks all the time in whatever environment, these are normal people who are feeling fear, but they have the courage to confront their fears and basically to turn negative fear, which is paralyzing us, into something positive. Do I like fear? No, I hate it. And even after 25 years and 12,000 jumps, fear is coming back all the time. I don't like it, but I'm using it. And I'm really using fear. I really believe, and that's so important, that someone who is not confronting fear will never get to know her or his deepest self. Why do I do this? Very simple, to get to know as a human being, what are my deepest motivation? What is my potential? How far can I go? And if you have this mindset in any type of environment, and basically you want to grow as a human being, you want to see how far, you don't want any regrets. Imagine yourself within 30, 35 years, looking back and telling yourself, I could have done it, but I was scared. I didn't take action. You want to tell this, or you want to tell yourself, I did it. I went all the way. I took the risks and I succeeded. And basically, I made my dreams come true, whatever you do. That's about fear. So the question I have all the time is, okay, but how do you do this? Give us a trick. Remember, there is no trick, but I have a technique. I have a strategy. When I'm confronted with fear, whether in my high-risk environment or in everyday life, I have an action plan. I have a strategy that I'm using all the time. And I'm going to share it very briefly. I call this the TAG strategy, T-A-G. And the first is T, trust yourself. It's sometimes important to be able, and that's your internal dialogue. It's so important. And this is something we work a lot in high performance psychology. What is the story you're telling yourself? Because the story you're telling yourself is who you become. So the story you're telling yourself, your internal dialogue, is so important and has a huge impact on your actions and basically on your life. Very simply, if you always tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, and believe me, you will never talk to a friend the way you're talking to yourself. A lot of people are self-destructing and with no reason. Becoming aware of the story you're telling yourself is a first step to confront your fear. So trust yourself. The more I prepare myself, the more I train, the higher my trust will be, my self-confidence. Very important. Preparation precedes mastery. That's so important. The way I prepare myself. My intuition, I follow my intuition all the time. It's something that will create self-confidence and trust as well. And then finally, and this is maybe the most important thing, I accept failure. It sounds weird, but when I'm standing on the edge, I know what can happen. And the more I can accept failure, I would even go further, embrace failure, the higher my self-confidence will be. I don't want to fail. Nobody wants to fail, but you have to embrace it. You have to accept it. And I look at failure, honestly, as long as I live, there is no failure for me. But I look at failure as a part of a process of success. So it's always the way you look at it. And then, so that's the T, trust yourself. A, accept fear. Fear is a very normal emotion. Don't fight it. Just accept it. And also action, taking action is the best antidote to fear. And then the last, the G, stands for give up control. The more you want to control things in your life, the more stress, the more fear you're going to create. And what we've seen the last 15 months is that we don't control shit. The only thing you can control is how you look at things and how you perceive things. So it's not what happened, it's how you frame it. This is something you can control. So giving up control, don't look for perfection, and accept uncertainty. I love uncertainty. You know why? Because uncertainty, I'm using it all the time. And basically certainty makes me fall asleep. Uncertainty makes me feel alive. And I use uncertainty to reinvent myself all the time in my environment. And that's the only way to stay relevant in a very fast changing environment. So that's how basically I can talk about it for hours, and you can ask me afterwards as many questions as you want. But I see a lot of people see uncertainty as a problem. I see uncertainty as a solution. And the thing also, what I see, especially in big organizations, is that people are expecting certainty from outside. You're building your certainty from inside. It's who you are. Your skills, the more you learn, the more you know, the more you dare, the more certainty you can build from within. But don't expect certainty from outside. So that's the more I'm good at what I do, the more certain I am that I'm gonna continue for a long time. So that's something we can discuss. And then finally about fear, and this is something I can talk about for hours. It's called the flow. You've heard about the flow. It's a state of hyper awareness. But to make it very short, fear only exists in the past. It's what we call depression in medical form, and even more in the future. And that's what we call anxiety. Fear doesn't exist in the present moment. The more you can be in the present moment, in the know, the more presence, the more productive you will be, the more creative you will be, the less fear you will have. When I'm flying, I'm so absorbed by the present moment that I don't feel any fear. I feel fear before, eventually after, if I scare myself. But I don't feel fear. I'm so absorbed. And it's very hard to apply this in everyday life or in your job, because there's so many things coming from outside that it's very hard to stay in the present moment. But that's why there is many forms of meditation and so on. Excuse me. There are many techniques to come back in the present moment. But this is so important. You know, I'm going to tell you something. The more I invest myself in the present moment, the more I can trust the future. And the more you get anxious about the future, the more control you lose on the present moment. Think about this. I'm going to go on my first power skill, and this is your mindset. And everything starts with your mindset. I see people with a lot of skills, a lot of talents, a lot of degrees, a lot of ambitions, but the wrong mindset. And then I see people with less talent, less degrees, but the right mindset. And I'm going to talk about 3 types of mindset here. You have agile mindset, you have owner's mindset, and then you have a purpose-driven mindset. You've heard about fixed and growth mindset. There are many books on this, and we all have a bit of both. We all have a bit of a fixed mindset, which is basically, I've been doing this for 15 years, so it's going to work for the next 15 years. I don't have to learn anything new. This is my comfort zone. I feel good in there. Well, it's okay for a certain amount of time, but it can be deadly. I see a lot of people, and I call this complacency. You've heard about complacency. In my environment, it's deadly. I've seen many, many people dying because they were complacent. In your environment, it's the fastest way to obsolescence. If you want to become irrelevant, be complacent. Basically, you become obsolete and your organization become obsolete. So the thing is, today, it's not about, do you know about having a growth or an agile mindset? It's not about knowing, it's about applying it. And the first thing, when you think about agile mindset or growth mindset, and I've been talking about this, yes, no, yes, okay. I've been talking about this, but it's determined by your beliefs and your habits. And we have a lot of limiting beliefs. And that's why sometimes we stay in a fixed mindset, and it's very hard to deal with transformation and change because we limit ourselves. Like I said, it's the story you're telling yourself. We have limiting beliefs all the time. I think one of the biggest limiting belief I see every day when I'm working with people is their age. When you talk to a 50-year-old, a lot of people who are 50 or more are telling themselves, oh, I'm too old for this. I'm too old to start something new. I'm too old to change. I'm too old. So what's the point? The 50 today, we live way longer. 50 today is like 35, 40 years ago, because we live longer. If you've seen Mad Men, for example, they eat like shit, they smoke all the time, and of course, they were living till 60. On the other hand, it's the same. I see 25-year-old people who are telling me, I don't have the experience. I'm not ready for this. Bullshit. This is a limiting belief. Or I didn't have the education to be in a business environment. Bullshit. Basically, we're limiting ourselves all the time, every day. The more awareness you create around what is basically limiting myself today. It's a question I ask all the time to people. What is limiting myself today? Where am I? The most limits you have are limits you're putting yourself. And also habits. Like I said, we have a lot of bad habits. Which habits can I change into positive habits, which are going to bring me closer to my goals and my dreams? That's from a fixed to a growth mindset. Then owner's mindset. And for me, that's the very start of transformation. It's basically being fully accountable. You can only start to change as a human being as if you take full accountability for everything, who you are, what you do, everything, your choices. I see way too many people complaining about external factors. It's the competition, it's my manager, it's the culture of the company. This is bullshit. Basically, you are the culture of the company, and every individual is creating every day the culture of an organization or a company. So stop complaining, and basically we are fully accountable. And like I said, there are many things we don't control, but what we control is how we look at things, how we react, how we perceive certain things. That's owner's mindset. And then finally, what I see with people with a very good mindset, strong mindset, they're purpose driven. And it's funny because a lot of time in organizations, they want people to be fully engaged. They want people to be passionate. They want people to be motivated every day, 24/7. You have to be engaged and motivated. It's not possible. It's humanly not possible. And moreover, not all of us started a job because it was a passion. What I see in many organizations is that people with time became passionate with what they do. Why? Because they have a clear purpose. And that's basically an extra dimension. And I think the more when you start a job, when you're 22, 25, you have a very selfish purpose. It's your career, it's your ambition, and it's fine. We all have a selfish purpose. It's very good. That's what drives us. That's what fuels us to become better. But I think the more you age and you get older, you want to share, you want to inspire people to grow because you had the opportunity to grow as well. So this is becoming basically the extra dimension. I have a lot of managers asking me, how can I bring my people on board? Because that's usually the biggest problem in organizations is I want my team to walk in the same direction. And then I tell them, you have to take time to inspire your people and give them a clear purpose, a shared purpose. And the answer I have most of the time is we don't have time for this. Well, if you are in this situation, take the time to inspire your people. If every day you go back home, well, not the last month, you're still home, but you close your computer, ask yourself, did I inspire people today to become better and to grow as human beings? I think this is purpose. A few years back, I was invited for a SpaceX presentation in the US. And I entered the room with, I think, 500-600 people. And on the first row of the room, it's a big room, first row, there were 5 guys, 5 men with a brown t-shirt with big white letters, helping people to go to Mars. And I was there with a colleague, a friend of mine, and I told him, these must be the engineers working with Elon Musk on the SpaceX program. They must be very important. And at the end of my presentation, they were cleaning up the room, taking the empty bottles, the trash. I said to my friend, they're so flexible here. They do everything. It's fantastic. And I went to one of these guys and said, what's your job? And he looked at me, you can't read. I'm helping people to go to Mars. I said, no, what do you do? Oh, I'm just a cleaner. But if my teams can work in a clean environment, in the end, I'm helping people to go to Mars. So regardless of what you do, whether you're frontline, back office, whatever, if you have a clear purpose, it's the why power. You've heard this before, but if you have a clear why, then the how and the what, especially in disruptive times like now, they're much easier. You can deal with uncertainty. You can find motivation back way easier, and then you can engage your people. That's mindset. Focus, my second power skill. And when you think about focus, most of the time you think about concentration. You think about someone who is very concentrated on, yes, that's your ability to perform a cognitive task. Very simply. It's becoming very hard. I'm not going to talk about this because for me, focus has another dimension as well. But it's your ability to perform a task. And if you ask yourself, how long can I stay focused on a task? I think in your environment, it's very hard. And average 10 years ago was 3 minutes, average. 10 years later, it's 45 seconds. Why? Very simple. We have a lot of distractions. And it's okay to have distractions. That's not the problem. The big problem is that distractions are controlling us. We're not controlling our distractions. There's too many things. And basically, we end up in a multitasking modus. Believe me, in my environment, multitasking is going to kill me. When I'm flying, when I'm standing on the edge, I'm not multitasking. Did you know, and there are many research on this, but did you know that multitasking is basically damaging your productivity, but it's also damaging your brain because it takes a lot of energy. You focus on a task, you get out of the task, you go to the other task. It's taking so much mental energy that it's really literally damaging your brain. Another type of focus, and this is what I want to talk about, is an interesting question. If you ask someone, how are you? Most of the time you will have, I'm super busy. I have no time for nothing. I have to be everywhere. I'm so busy. There's a really good book, Being Busy is for Idiots. And then on the other side, you see highly productive people. So you have two types of people. You have the busy ones and you have the productive ones. So where is the difference? If you ask a busy person, how many priorities do you have? Most of the time they will tell you, oh, I have too many priorities. I have too many things to do. I say yes to everything because I want to be part of everything. And when you ask highly productive people, they're going to tell you, I'm super selective. Most of the time I say no. Very hard to say no without having to justify yourself all the time. And they have very few priorities. And that's, for me, focus is the new IQ, because the more, if you look at highly productive people, but if you look at elite athletes, there was a really interesting interview on Federer a few years ago. And the journalist asked him, how do you keep performing at such a level after so many years? And he answered very simply, if I keep focusing on my priorities, I will keep performing on my highest level. And if you look at people who are at a very high level in what they do, they're monotasking, they're super laser focused. They have a very highly what we call selective behavior. I always tell people, do less, but better. And don't try to be everywhere, because if you want to be good at something, at one point you have to make choices. It's not easy, but you have to make hard choices. So that's focus. And I'm going to end with trust. And well, trust is more in a team environment. And as you can see, there's a Formula One team. I had the opportunity to work with them a few years back. And what really struck me was the level of trust. These people, they have everything. They have technology, they have motivation, they're passionate, they have the full package. But how do they change a wheel in less than 2 seconds? It's simply because they trust each other. So trust is really where you make the difference. And it goes in both ways. I think in a post-COVID world, your biggest asset will be your reputation. You want to be a trusted leader. You want to be reliable. You want to be credible. People, when they talk about you, they want to work with you because they trust you. And that's becoming one of the most important assets. In your team, it's exactly the same. You want to trust people, and fast. We don't have the time to say, yeah, but they have to earn trust. And that's old school. Let's be new school. And let's give a chance to people and trust them right away, even in diversity. And there are techniques for that. We can talk a little bit after the pause, but I'm going to basically, and a very simple question. If I ask you the question, who wants to be trusted? You can raise your hand so I see some of you. Who wants to be trusted? Yeah, everyone wants to be trusted. Okay. Who trusts everyone? Reverse the question. Who trusts everyone? I don't see any hands. No, it's very hard to trust everyone. We never do this, but we all want to be trusted. There's a problem here. So how do you trust people? There are many, and for me, trust, it's very simple. But if you look at it in your environment, and when I work with a team, it's like we talked about inclusion, diversity. You need trust, and trust. The first goal when I talk about trust is to create a safe space. And a safe space, very simple. You want your people to be able to speak up, to be able to show their vulnerability, to be able to show empathy, to be able to communicate clearly, transparent, in an authentic way, to have compassion. And I would go even further, to dare to fail in an organization, because that's where you innovate, and dare to speak up. How many organizations are not there anymore because people were afraid to speak up because there was no trust? So the higher the trust, the safer, we call this psychological safety, the higher, the better your safe space. And basically your people will perform better as well, because there is a lot of trust. And for me, there are a few things. Owner's mindset. If you have a team of people who are fully accountable, the trust is going to increase. Clear communication, shared purpose, get to know the people you work with. It's simple. Everybody knows that, but are we taking the time, especially the last 15 months, to get to know the people we work with, to make a human connection? I think it's an interesting time because the lines are blurred between private and professional. Isn't it a great opportunity to make work more human, and basically to trust each other and to create a safe space where we can be ourselves, and we don't have to hide and be a different person when we work, and be a different person. You see me here. This is who I am. This is who I am with my friends. This is who I am with my family. This is who I am. There is no line between, I play, there is no line between private and professional. And I think this is literally the future of work. And this is only achievable if you can trust each other. This is so important. And this is in Switzerland a few years back. And behind me is my wingman, my cameraman. I'm ready to go. I'm really ready. You see, my wings are open. I'm going to catch air, and the more air I catch, the faster I start to fly, and the better I can perform and have a glide ratio. And I will never forget, but I think 2-3 seconds before leaping off the edge, my cameraman, who was a friend, who's still a friend, said, "If you die, I die." Wrong timing. So you see, communication is also a question of timing. Completely wrong, but very clear communication. Couldn't be clearer. I jumped. I was ready. I was in the zone. I was focused. I was ready to go. The weather was perfect, and I jumped. We landed on a field, and I laughed at him. I said, next time you tell me this way before or way after, but not 2 seconds before jumping. But he was right. He had a clear point. If I make a mistake, he's framing me. He's not looking where he's flying. If I make a mistake, if I hit a tree, if I hit a rock, we both die, because he's following me blindly, almost. If he flies above me, he falls in my depression. There's no air above me. We're both on the ground. So in this environment, you need a high level of trust. In your environment, it's exactly the same. And then finally, I really believe, like I said in the beginning, in being bold, in taking risks, because this is the only way to create, to innovate, to progress, to grow as a human being. And that's what I call educated risk-taking. But if you can create more self-awareness, if you can create resilience, and like I said, this is something you can really work on. If you can deal with fear and have the courage to confront your fears on a daily basis. You've heard this before, but do every day something that scares you. You're going to expand your comfort zone. Basically, what you think is unthinkable today is becoming the new normal tomorrow. And I think that's very interesting. And then finally, if you have the right mindset, if you're open to grow, to learn, if you're not complacent, if you are very selective with what you do, you make choices and you have a very high focus. And finally, you're a trusted leader and you can create a safe space in your environment to take more risks as well. You're going to be ready to jump and you're going to basically go closer and closer to who you are, your dreams and your goal. So my question here is, are you ready to jump? Thank you.